Hello Nursery!
Hello!
Today we are being scientists and we are going to do an experiment. For our experiment today we've got some fresh water and we're going to make this one into salt water, just like the water where the animals live in the Arctic and just like the sea water. And we're going to see and make predictions about which things we think might float and which things we think might sink in our water. So we've got an egg, a badger, a rabbit and a big polar bear. So I've made a little chart already, and on my chart it says object, float, sink. So what object shall we do first then, Pip?
Oh, let's do the badger.
So I'm going to write B for badger. Do you think the badger is going to float in the water or sink in the water?
Oh, I think it will sink in the fresh water.
So in this water, Pip thinks the badger will sink. I'm going to do a big cross for sink, because we think it will sink, and then I'm going to write fresh water next to it, so we know which one it is. Okay, Pip, if I bring the bowl closer to you, do you want to put the badger in?
Oh, yes, please.
Drop it in the water then, Pip. And what has happened?
Oh, it's made a big plop.
It has. Can you see, Nursery? Our badger has sunk to the bottom. Alright, we're going to take the badger out of our fresh water and we're going to make our salt water. So for this we've just got water from the tap and some salt, which we're going to pour in.
Oh, look at all that salt.
You're going to help me mix it, Pip?
Oh, yes.
We get our spoon. Mix all the salt into the water so it dissolves. Thank you, Pip. What do we think might happen now when we put the badger in the salt water? I think it might float.
I think it will sink again.
So I'm going to put a cross on float, because I think it's going to float in the salt water. Shall we give it a go? Do you want to put it in again, Pip?
Oh, yes.
There's our badger. Where's it gone? Uh-oh, look, I think Pip was right. Our badger has sunk to the bottom.
I'm always right.
I'm going to fish our badger out. Give it another stir. Okay, move that one back. What animal shall we do next? Shall we do the polar bear, the rabbit, or maybe the egg?
Oh, let's do the egg.
Shall we do the egg next? Okay, what do you think might happen, Nursery, when we put it in the fresh water? What do you think might happen, Pip?
I think it will float.
You think it will float in the fresh water? So let's write it on our chart. Egg. We think it will float in the fresh water. Let's see what happens. Right, let's see what happens when we put our egg in the fresh water. Oh, what's happened, Nursery? Have a little look. What's happened, Pip?
Oh, it's sunk.
Yeah, it's all the way at the
Too
bottom
heavy.
of the bowl. It's too heavy. What about if we put it in our salt water? What do we think might happen when we put it in there, Nursery? What do you think might happen in there, Pip?
Well, surely it will float in that one.
Let's see. We think it will float in the salt water. Let's see. What do you think, Nursery? Are you watching? Wow! Can you see that, Nursery? Our egg is floating at the top of the jug.
Oh, it's like magic.
It's like magic. It's very cool. It's not going anywhere even if I touch the egg. Bounces back to the top. That is very cool. Let's take our egg out so we know that the egg floats in the salt water. So we've done the egg, we've done our badger. We've got 2 more to try. Okay, what shall we do next then? Shall we try the rabbit?
Oh, go on then.
Do you think the rabbit will float in the freshwater, Nursery, or do you think it will sink to the bottom? What do you think, Pip?
I think it's gonna sink. It's too heavy.
Right, I'm going to write rabbit. And I'm going to put a cross next to sink and write fresh water. Do you want to put it in then, Pip?
Oh, go on then.
There we go, into the fresh water. Oh, just like Pip predicted, our rabbit has sunk to the bottom. It was too heavy in there. Well, let's see what will happen when we put it in our salt water. Do you think it will sink or do you think it will float? What do you think, Nursery? What do you think, Pip?
Oh, I think it's gonna sink again. It's still too heavy.
Let's put our prediction then. We think it's going to sink in the salt water too. Let's see if we're right. You want to put it in the salt water, Pip? Bring it a bit closer to you. There we go. Pop it in. Oh, what has happened, Nursery? What has happened, Pip?
Oh, it's sunk again.
It has, you were right. It's too heavy. It's too heavy. You fish him out. Oh, that makes me think that the polar bear might be too heavy too. So I think the polar bear, I'm going to write it on my sheet, will sink in both the fresh and the salt water. What do you think, Nursery? Do you think the polar bear will sink or float? What do you think, Pip?
I think sink again.
Sink. Shall we give it a go?
Oh, yes.
Do you want to put it in, Pip? There's the polar bear. Let's bring the water closer. In it goes. And it's sunk to the bottom of the water. It's very heavy, that polar bear. Let's fish him out. Is he going to sink or float in the salt water? What do we think? I think he's going to sink. Let's put him in. I'm going to put him in. Oh, down he goes all the way to the bottom. That polar bear was too heavy as well. And he sunk. We've got one more thing to try, and this is this spice jar here. What do we think about the spice jar?
Oh, it's quite heavy and it's filled with water.
It is. It's quite heavy and it's got water in it.
So if it's heavy, it will sink.
That's right. So it might sink because it's quite heavy. So we're going to predict that we think it will sink in the fresh water. Shall we test it out?
Oh.
Let's put it in the fresh water. Oh, can you hear that, Nursery? It's dropped all the way to the bottom. It's too heavy. Let's take it out of that one. Oh, what do we think will happen when we put it in the salt water? What do you think will happen, Pip?
Oh, I think it might float.
Oh, it might float. Oh, that's interesting. I think it's going to sink again because it's very heavy. What do you think will happen, Nursery? Let's put it in. Are you ready? Look! top of the jug. Why is it that it's floating on the top?
Well, two things. Number one, salty water is better for things floating.
Ah.
Number two, because it's filled with water, it floats easier because it's mostly water.
Ah, so because there's water in this spice jar and because it's in the salt water, that's why it floats. Thanks for sharing that information, Pip.
No, that's alright. I am a chief scientist.
You certainly are. Do you think Nursery should have a go at doing this experiment at home?
Oh, yes. It's
We've
a good
had
one.
lots of fun doing it. So all you need for the experiment is some containers that you can put fresh water and salt water in, and lots of different objects for you to try out. And don't forget to make your prediction as to whether it will sink or float, and make your own prediction sheet that you can bring along to Zoom later on. We look forward to seeing about which of your objects sank and which of your objects floated. And we'll see you all later. Bye!
Bye bye!